not be really like a proper presentation. It will be more sort of a discussion opener, really, for the coming months. I mean, ideally, this would have been the first point of discussion about starting to think to plan for new grant applications and life after the cost section, ideally as a debate or discussion opener for our next meeting, which would coincide with a management committee meeting, which would theoretically have happened in July. But as you see, with all of these conditionalities, I'm not really sure we will be able to have a meeting in July, because it's anyone's guess as to whether we will be able to travel internationally in July. And one of the issues relating to that is that if it's not clear that we will be able to travel internationally in the period between 1st May 2020 and April 2021, then I'm not sure we can sustain the action as such, because the budget is linked intimately to traveling. And if we can't travel, then I'm not sure what the budget is going to be for, and that has all sorts of implications. But anyway, because we don't know what the future holds, I'm just sort of bringing some possible sort of things to discuss. Obviously, if we were to continue with the cost action 1 year more, which would be ideally our first conference, but this is still a bit question mark in relation to also how the cost association is going to react to the current situation and how much room for maneuver they have, which I don't honestly know whether in connection with the European Commission, the H2020 program, they will have some room to change a bit the requirements of what a cost action activity actually is, or whether they will have to stick to the current guidelines and definitions. But if we were to have an extra year, then we would be eligible in the future. I think we would have to be thinking about that at some point in early 2021, of two schemes or opportunities within the cost funding itself. The first one is called the Final Action Dissemination Grant. It's not very clear to me yet, because I've tried to find information about this on the cost action page, but I've not really found much information yet other than a form that you have to fill in to apply for this Final Action Dissemination Grant, but I don't know what the amount of the grant can be. In principle, these are grants that are foreseen for having, for example, a final book, or you could have a final video summarizing all of the work that has been done. So we could have, for example, decide that we want to apply for money to do an animated video showcasing the different tools that we've done in the Survey Data Hub. It can also be a number of journal articles. So let's say that we decided that we are going to put together one special issue or 2 or 3 different special issues on academic journals, and we wanted to fund, for example, open access for those articles in the special issues, then we would be able to apply for that in Final Action Dissemination Grant. So that's one option, but obviously a condition of applying for a Final Action Dissemination Grant is to have something to disseminate in the first place. I think we're going to be pretty confident that we can disseminate properly the survey registry with metadata. So at in the worst case scenario, we could try to have something relating to that, either an animated video or some sort of online training material. The second scheme might be a little bit more interesting. I was able to find information about that. It's called the Cost Innovators Grant, and this is to support the launching of a product or service. And I think that probably the online tools that we are producing would qualify for at least not necessarily the product definition, but perhaps the service one. And this scheme seems a little bit more interesting because it says that you can get a grant of up to 125,000 euros. So it does seem that it might allow for the funding of finishing specific products. So we might consider that for later stages of the work that we want to do, things relating, for example, to the data playground part of the survey data hub that we had initially thought of producing, or for some of the other components. So then I don't have a very clear sense necessarily, so I don't have a very specific proposal of what to do with this, but I wanted to at least use this opportunity to canvass interest among those of you who might be more geared towards some of this technical work, whether that's DCs or people in other data archives, whether you might be interested in looking at this together and seeing what the opportunities are. That's one first idea or possibility about future options. A second possibility that I wanted to just kind of throw out in public is that I know for a fact that teams or networks that have successfully sort of worked in a first cost action can have a higher chance of success for a second cost action that proposes to continue some of the work that they've done in the first action, but extend it to certain areas or domains. Now, the first thing I should say is there's no way in my life I will ever again coordinate a cost action. So let me make this very, very clear from the start. So this would require someone to volunteer to be the next cost action proposal coordinator and to think of actually doing it locally. Now, I think that some organizations or institutions might be better placed to be a cost action coordinator than others. And I think this all very much depends on what sort of administrative support you already have in your institution. I'm not really sure, but there might be the possibility that some organizations who have a better support infrastructure than universities actually have might be willing to consider that, because if it's part of work that they're doing anyway, I'm not suggesting that I have had any conversations, but let's say that if CESTA already has some structural operations and staff that are working on very related things and have a sort of professional set of staff, they might not mind being the coordinators. I don't know, I've not had a conversation with them, but there might be other organizations represented here in the room who operate on a similar basis that have the sort of basic human resources in place, that the negative elements of cost does not affect them that much. And what this actually means is, in practice, is that whoever, if anyone wants to consider this, you need to have permanent staff to support the international network without relying on the 15% overheads that you get. Because one of the negative aspects about the cost action is that if the meetings turn out to be cheaper than you had originally thought that they were turned out to be, then your 15% might be a lot smaller than you initially were foreseeing, and then you're running on a deficit in terms of the human resources that you're hiring locally. So either you're from an organization where human resources and labor costs are very, very cheap, and you know for sure that the 15%, no matter what the amount eventually is going to cover those human resources, or you come from an organization where you already have those human resources in place and you're not dependent on the 15%, and the 15% is just something extra that you're bringing to your organization. Now, I know that these are a set of requirements that perhaps very few organizations meet. So I just wanted to, well, suggest that if anyone thinks that they could take on this role, then I'm very happy to have a one-on-one meeting or set of meetings and explain to them exactly what it implies, and then that they can actually, unlike me, get into a cost action proposal with all the facts and with all the information about what it will imply in organizational and financial terms. But there's other cost action networks that have actually transitioned successfully to from a first cost action to a second cost action. Now, of course, where we would take that, it could be in many ways, depending also on the interest of who would be coordinating such a second cost action proposal. But there's, for example, the possibility of extending the work that we do to cover not only quantitative surveys, as we've done in this cost action, but to try to at least include some qualitative studies as well. Or it could expand by moving beyond the focus on ethnic and migrant minority surveys, and to expand it to other types of surveys that are also kind of either target group based or topic based, or are focusing on a specific subpopulation as well. But that's a second possibility if someone is interested in pursuing or at least considering that. A third option that at least I'm aware of that could actually fit some of the capacity that we already have built in this nearly 3 years is the Erasmus Plus program. And this might be an interesting possibility. They have a scheme called Knowledge Alliances, and as you, many of you who are in universities or higher education organizations, you know the Erasmus Plus program is not too different necessarily in some aspects to how the cost actions operate, because they're funding mostly mobility schemes. Now, there is the possibility of proposing, for instance, knowledge alliances that are relating to training at the master's and at the PhD level, that I think would suit some of the way that we've been working. That might be an interesting thing to consider, by which we would create a network of university and research organizations which are not necessarily degree granting, plus private companies, and we would form a consortium where master's students and PhD students would actually have mobility opportunities. And this can be, to a certain extent, similar to some of the work that we've been doing in the cost action in relation to the short-term scientific mission. So it's not too different to things that we are already used to doing, but it will be a lot more structure, and will combine the elements of training generations into aspects relating to open data and technical know-how of how to handle survey data, with also the sort of substantive component of the focus that we're interested in, ethnic and minority survey data. Now, the closest call has recently closed in February 2020. It was completely impossible to even consider to look into that, given the current workload. The next call will close in February 2021. It's usually issued, the call for applications, at some point in October or November. But usually with these schemes, the application forms and procedures don't change very much from one year to the next. So if some of you were interested in these, the requirement, if I recall correctly from the top of my head, is that there needs to be at least 6 partners from 3 different member states or participating states. So we would need to set up a network of at least 6, 7, 8 different organizations combining both degree granting organizations plus other types of organizations, because for the knowledge alliances you need to also have private companies. But it would not be, for example, perhaps impossible. I know that Aniko has been in close contact recently with Kantar. They might be interested in such a scheme, potentially. I don't know, I'm not discussing with them. But there are some private survey organizations that might be interested in a scheme like that, and welcoming interns for a specific period of time, both at the master's level and the PhD level. There's another call within the Erasmus Plus program, which is called Strategic Partnerships. I'm still unclear as to whether that is a good fit for the kind of things that we're doing, but we could explore looking into that a little bit more. Only if I get a sufficient number of expressions of interest. If I don't have four or five universities or research centers represented in the cost action that would be potentially interested, then I'm not going to bother to look into the action call for applications to know the detail. So this is really all that I have to tell you in relation to future options for grants. It's more like a teaser for you to think about these options, or if you know about other schemes as well that might allow us to continue with this agenda beyond, if we're successful in getting a 4th year beyond 2021, and if not, then I don't know, perhaps sooner if we need to. Okay, any comments, questions about this? Yes.
Yes, with regard to the Erasmus Plus program and the knowledge alliances, would that application need to be supported by a master's degree or anything like that, or?
I don't think so. We need to look into the details, but I don't think that we need to create a new degree. Because that's a different scheme. In the Erasmus Plus program, what I saw is that new master degrees or new joint PhDs are part of a different call. As far as I understood this, but I've only sort of read a little bit sort of diagonally the instructions and the call for applications. This is meant to foster the mobility and not necessarily a joint awarding of a degree. So this would be perhaps students that are already taking a degree with you in Autonoma. They could come either to Sciences Po for a mobility period that could be 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. I don't know exactly the details. But they could as well go, for instance, to Kantar, and I'm just making up the options of where they would go. For a 2-month internship or a 3-month internship as part already of their own degree requirements. So what this would then require at this stage of application is sort of honing down very carefully whether our own degrees allow these types of mobility periods. Because if they don't, then you can't be a successful partner. So if there's no period when your master students can actually be away from campus for a couple of months or 3 months, then obviously it's going to be incompatible with their own degree. But as far as I understood, the Knowledge Alliances does not require us setting up a new degree. It requires us to set up a program of mobility that has a very clear sense of direction of what are the skills and the training and the knowledge that the students are going to get. And I've said master and PhD, but I don't think that there's anything that excludes that this also includes undergraduate students. It's just whether we feel that it's useful for undergraduate students or not.